Hello and welcome to the Under Center podcast. I'm your host, Darren Marr, and I'm joined by actually, guys, this week I have nothing to say about you this week. Just Jake and Fionn this week. Lads, how are you?
Excellent.
Not too bad. I'm not often just Jake, but today I'll take it.
Well, you were Jake Woodhead earlier on in the week, so
he was Jake Woodhead.
This week's we had our new show earlier on in the week, so if you've caught that, thank you very much for watching. If you haven't, make sure you go back and check that out. If you want to watch it back on Twitter, you can at UnderCenterPod. If you want to watch it back on YouTube, just search Undercenter Podcast on YouTube. Watch it there. Make sure you like that video and subscribe to us there too, so you'll be kept up to date for all of our latest releases. If you prefer the audio side, just go to wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Undercenter Podcast. Same thing. Subscribe to it there too, and you'll be kept in the loop for all of our shows. But today we are having our big fantasy football show, and on the show today to speak about fantasy football strategy, sleepers, breakout stars this year, we have the lads from the Fourth and Inches podcast, Ireland's premier fantasy football podcast, and we're joined by Paddy and JT. Hopefully we'll get Jonathan on in a couple of minutes time, but lads, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Very good, thanks.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having us.
No problem, man. No problem at all. I've been listening to it for the last couple of weeks, and I'm very intrigued to see what sort of players, because I'm going to need some advice now, because I'm drafting a couple of leagues now in the next week or so. So I want to know these sleepers that I can get that is going to win me in the league, so I can be a back-to-back champion on the team this year. Fionn has decided to stay away from Air League this year because he knows he's going to get beaten.
Those who can't do fantasy, Dara.
And those who can't fantasy, just podcast.
I have to say, I'm a fan of your podcast. I was listening the last couple of episodes, but you really gave you weren't very convincing in regards to trying to tell everyone that you didn't know anything about Love Island. It did not convince me at all.
I get it by proxy. That's just not. I don't watch it.
Osmosis.
Jake does have a secret Love Island podcast that he does every other day of the week. That's why we can only get
Jake's
one
Island
day a week to
up on
record. But we're not here to talk about Love Island. That's Jake's other show. You can catch that like 4 other days a week now on wherever you get your podcast. But we're here to talk fantasy football, and JT, I'm going to ask you first on this question, because what would sort of be the strategy now for a first time fantasy football player heading into a draft? If he's playing, like, let's call it a 10-team PPR league, he's picking in the top 5, so would you be looking at sort of going for a running back in the first round?
Well, maybe, Dara, before can we talk about what a PPR league is? Let's start at the very basics, because I'm not sure I even know what a PPR league is.
Okay. PPR is just points per reception it stands for. So basically, it's the exact same as a standard league, except for if a running back or a wide receiver catches a pass, they get an extra point for that. And it's kind of become the standard now. So our league is off the NFL Fantasy website, and their standard is PPR. So that's what we roll with.
For the first couple of fantasy football leagues that I ever joined, well, they went shockingly because I didn't really fully understand it at the start. I had no idea what PPR was, and every time I was looking up at like a mock draft and stuff like that, it was all PPR, and I was like, what is this? Like, I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, we had the same confusion there as well, and when we went PPR, I didn't really adjust. So you were saying, Dara, what advice would you give to a complete newbie? And I suppose my advice would be, running backs and wide receivers for I would certainly say the first 6 rounds. I never go near a quarterback until round 7. And as I was saying in our podcast, like you are passing up on the top 8 quarterbacks, I'd say, around that stage, but there's plenty of value there, and there's not much difference between, the top quarterback and, let's say, the 10th quarterback in regards points per game. And I think, look, even we fell into that. I think I remember, Paddy, we started our league about maybe 10 years ago, and I think you drafted Aaron Rodgers in the first round. And there was a bit of that going on, but we've learned plenty since. But lads, if you're just starting out, please don't be drafting your quarterbacks early.
I have to say, I'm an absolute devil for that. Not first round, but I look at the pure number, and when we get past a certain level of wide receiver and running back, my heart tells me, nah, these quarterbacks are better players than the running backs and the wide receivers that are left. Go in there, get Aaron Rodgers. I love getting Aaron Rodgers every year. He's a fantasy god. I snab him up early, maybe a round or two early. I'd probably go for about the 5th round. I try and pick up a quarterback. Is that an absolutely terrible decision, or can you get away with that?
No, you can get away with it. But once you do that, Fionn, as soon as you pick your Aaron Rodgers, everyone else panics then. And then
yes, that's what I'm terrified of missing the good quarterbacks. And I panic by early and get a chain reaction in the rest of the league. And then you never know, you might nick an L wide receiver later on in the draft because you panic by everyone else into going early.
Fionn forced us to panic draft Carson Wentz this year in a team fantasy football that we have against other podcasts.
But that,
I'm a big believer in Carson Wentz. I draft him every year.
It wasn't his first choice.
We were panicked into doing that mostly because I think it was a super flex league. So for anyone who doesn't know that, 2 quarterbacks are going to be in that team. So I think the first 5 picks were all quarterbacks, and they were all quarterbacks that ran the ball as well as throwing it. So the likes of Lamar, obviously, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, all those sort of guys were gone in like the first 5 picks.
Yeah, and I will be targeting. Go on, Paddy.
I was just going to say, I think that's a big change in the league in general, not just the fantasy. That rookies are coming in that are running the ball, that you can pick up in the 13th, 14th round. Guys like last year, Justin Herbert went undrafted in our league. The year before, Lamar went in like the 15th. Paddy Mahomes, in the first season, he wasn't drafted high. I think just the nature of these guys are rookies, so you can wait later, pick up a rookie, a guy like next year, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. They're probably going to come in and eventually, if they get the game time, be really good fantasy players just because they will run and throw. So if you're not going to get, I don't know, Mahomes or Josh Allen at a stretch, Aaron Rodgers, then I would just hold off personally.
Yeah, and looking at then, we talked that, for a 10-team league, we'd be talking about maybe going running backs and wide receivers in the first 6 rounds. But in terms of you had that first overall pick this year, I'll start with you, Paddy, on this one. Who would you be drafting first overall if you had that pick in your draft?
You're definitely going to target an RB. I think if you're going, and this isn't me just being a homer because I'm a Packers fan, the only player out with an RB you could potentially go number 1 is Devontae Adams. But I think if you're not going with C-Mac or Dalvin Cook, or probably the 2, I would maybe, as much as I like C-Mac, I think because he's come back from injury, although the training camp reports are really strong, I love watching Dalvin Cook. I think he's such a great player. His numbers last year were incredible, and because they've got such a struggle with the quarterback position, they're always just going to be very run heavy. So I would push for Dalvin Cook as my number 1 pick.
JT, I'm very disappointed. We've a big exclusive coming out tomorrow, and your running back strategy, and I'm left to be listening to you there, and it's there's a bit of nervousness there.
There's no nervousness.
You've gone away from it.
I have
it all. Gone away from it. Or do you not want to give out your secrets?
No, I'm giving out all the secrets here. And in terms of I'd be different to Paddy in terms of my first overall. In fact, I do have first overall pick in our league, and I am going with the absolute cheat code that is Christian McCaffrey. And I think he's the experts' consensus for first overall. I think what you're getting is a running back 1 and a wide receiver 2 rolled into 1. Since 2017, the only running back that got more targets was Kamara, and that wouldn't have been the case if McCaffrey wasn't injured last year. In fact, McCaffrey would have been miles ahead in that category. And I think, look, the Panthers have said his role is not going to change this year. He has been the best fantasy player for the last 3 years, and the snap count is outrageous. Like if you look at it, he never leaves the field. And even when you have, last year, Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson, and DJ Moore, I think, on the field at the same time, it's not Christian McCaffrey that's suffering in regards to targets there when they're all on the field. It's one of the wide receivers. So he's getting everything. And I just think in terms of, you mentioned about his injury, like, I don't think his injury last year should kind of skew your perspective on his durability. Like he never missed a game before last year. So he's not injury prone. He's looking good in camp, and I just think he's going to ball out this year. And I wouldn't overlook him for first overall. I'd be taking him.
There you go.
Lads, let me ask you just a quick question here. I don't know if you are aware of, oftentimes I'm looking up different strategies to use while drafting players and stuff, and oftentimes I come up against the zero RB strategy. What do you make of that? That's where you don't draft a running back and you go all wide receivers, tight ends, quarterback, and then you see who you can pick up in the garbage pile afterwards.
Well, this is what Johnny was alluding to when he came on there. I'm actually going with a modified zero running back policy. So I'm going to take C-Mac, have him there, and then I'm just going to load up my shopping bag with wide receivers after that. And I'll take me running backs from the mid-rounds.
Guys, when you're going through your draft and you have an idea, like you kind of know beforehand where you're going to pick in the order of the first round, do you guys stick with a really rigid plan of these are the players that I want, and if they're available, I'm 100% taking them no matter what else is on the board? Or is it much more reactive for you guys? Do you nearly take it one pick at a time, reanalyze the board after every pick and adjust as you go? Or do you stick with something solid as you're making your way through the draft?
I personally, if there's a player I'm really into, then I'll try my best to get him. But I think one thing we covered in our pod last time was not being the guy that really overreaches for that player that you sort of fall in love with in pre-season or whatever. And even if you really want to make sure that you're as I say, you're not reaching 2-3 rounds above where you should be picking them, just you're feared that one of your pals is going to pick them up instead. I personally don't really go into many drafts with a specific strategy. My main strategy is best player available and try and pick them up. And when I get to maybe round 6, 7, 8, start filling in the positions that I need to bulk out. I know Johnny has and JT have a far more, well, JT this year with the zero RB, and Johnny has a far more rigid system in terms of, right, I'm drafting this position now. But for me, that's I just get drawn in by best player available, like any good NFL run team. Take that to fantasy. Best player available in the draft.
You can call me Jack Reacher because I will reach for a player, but I'll target maybe one or two that I have to have, and I'll even say them in advance. Jalen Hurts, I'll be taking him this year. Round 8 is his ADP. If I have to reach into round 7, I'll do that. Now I wouldn't be reaching any more than one round, unless it's later on in the draft. But I have no problem. There will always be one or two lads that I have to have, and that's what I'd be doing.
So would you recommend then, say, kind of maybe having your players, but also sticking somewhat to the ADP as well?
Yeah, I generally stick to the ADP, but I'll kind of have a list of players in around the pick that I'm picking at, and I'll rank them then, that list of players, and you'd be kind of winging it then maybe after rounds 14, 15, 16.
Okay.
Lads, I want to ask you about two players, and you briefly mentioned one of them. Being a little undervalued this year, and that's Alvin Kamara and Zeke Elliott. Kamara is going to probably be. He obviously is going to be RB1, but he could end up being wide receiver 1 this year with the Michael Thomas injury and the sort of lack of targets and the uncertainty in the quarterback position as well this year. So, the obviously easiest thing for a quarterback under pressure, dump it off to your running back and let him do something with it. So is he sort of a player that maybe a player should look seriously at taking, if not number one, definitely maybe second overall?
I actually have him down as one of the biggest. I think he's going to be a bust this year. I think with the uncertainty that is in the Saints at the minute, Jameis Winston, how long is Sean Payton going to put up with his interception, and then I had Kamara last year, and he had a mid quarterback, and everything in the red zone just got taken from him, and you're sitting there going, I've taken this fella second or third, and I'm getting absolutely zero return off him. Like I think he had 3 games where he was getting 6 or 7 points ball in from the end zone, and that's one of the big factors with that you're going to fall into with the Saints is they've no wide receiver one. If Winston is turning the ball over, which he done with like 2 of the best wide receivers in Tampa Bay, where do you go? Kamara does lose out on Taysom Hill. So I think he is a bust. I think if you're taking him top 5, you could be disappointed that he's not going to give you the return that you're going to get. And I know Paddy would probably have similar on Zeke. He had Zeke last year, and he definitely didn't feed Paddy's fantasy football team.
No, not at all. I think. I mean, maybe I'm just getting sucked in by the Hard Knocks hype that comes with any team that's on that show, but. Seeing Zeke, he's quite a lovable figure on the show. So maybe I'm reevaluating that. If he fell to me in the draft, I'd maybe pick him up this year. I think he's poised for. Although I think JT might have another viewpoint on it, but I think he's poised for a return, assuming Dak comes back and Dak is the type of player. I mean, Zeke last year before Dak's injury was a top 3, I think, running back, and then as soon as Dak went down, he was barely in the top 10. I think he was about 14th or 15th. So you can see the difference that his Dak's injury had on Elliott. So I think if a fit Dak means Zeke is definitely primed for. I think his ADP is probably around 5 or 6. So I'd be pretty happy if he fell to me about then.
Yeah, and I mentioned Zeke as well because, either side of me here, co-hosts, are NFC East team fans. So they obviously think very poorly of Zeke. And if, like you're saying, if his ADP is around 5 or 6, you do have that sort of question to ask where, do I go with Zeke? The last couple of years, he sort of hasn't lived up to the expectation. But with that coming back, there is the chance that he may regain some of his form from previous years, or do we sort of start looking at the wide receivers that are available on the board, like a Devontae Adams or a Tyreek Hill?
Well, lads, if I'm sitting there at 6th pick and Zeke is there, I'm not taking him. I just think his elite days are behind him. Last year he had a career low. I think it was 15 fantasy points per game, which isn't terrible. But if you factor in that's the second year in a row that he is declining in production. Like 2019 there, he had one of the best O-lines in the league. Dak was healthy. He had career low production that year as well. He's trending downwards. Running backs don't often come back from a 2-year slide. And also he's been running to the ground over the last 5 years. So I think only Mark Ingram has more career touches than him as far as running backs in an active NFL roster. So and I would have concerns about his character too. Like the fact that he went downhill when Dak Prescott got injured, C-Mac would have carried the team on his back. He did do that. And I just think, I'm not sold on Zeke. Paddy, you would know as well, Mike McCarthy doesn't really commit to 3 down backs. And, when you add in the fact that Tony Pollard is there, who was an absolute stud, I think he's a gamble at that ADP. I think the ADP is reflective of his ceiling rather than what I think you're going to get out of him this season.
I don't think I'd even pick him if it was the 6th round. Never mind the 6th pick, he was still on the board.
That's harsh. I'm a Ziggy fan. I'm a Ziggy fan though, so I like him. I think he will be better. I think he'll be better this year.
What worries me is what seems to be the only 4 brain cells he has left rattling around in that head of his that we see on Hard Knocks. That's what I'm kind of worried about. He ran backwards for more yards than he ran forwards last season. I can tell you that much.
He needs a few mojo moments next season on the
mojo moments.
Guys, I have a quick question, and it's probably the position I find trickiest to draft, and that's tight end. Whereabouts on the spectrum of draft, maybe not position, but in terms of areas you address, where do you put them? And while you're answering, maybe who are the key targets, maybe the top 5 targets to go for this season at tight end?
I think the best one is Kelce. Like Kelce's a top 2 rounder, top 3 rounder. That's the big outlier this year. Where do you take him? We have guys that are saying they're going to take him in the first round. I think that's a stretch. I do understand he is the unicorn, as they call him, that he can do everything and anything, but he's still a rookie. And I think Kelce is still the main dog in the house. I think when people see him going, I think there is that little bit of panic, like QB. I need to get a tight end. That's where that leads off. But I think Kelce, Kittle, they're 1 and 2, definitely. Waller. And then production. Yeah, Waller. Johnny, you can know who JT has.
But listen, as far as tight ends are concerned, if you need to pick them up really early or very late, as far as I'm concerned. So if you're not picking up one of them 3, I wouldn't be touching tight ends till round 10, and there's loads of value there.
Well, we got Kittle in our draft, which I think is a pretty good get. And again, he fell pretty late on in the draft rounds. I was quite surprised. I would have put him up there. I would probably put him ahead of Waller, to be honest, in terms of tight end talent. Although maybe the fantasy aspect changes it a little bit, but for me, he would be up there with Waller.
Yeah,
I think as well, though. Jimmy G, who's going to be the QB?
Yeah,
are they going to be? Again, will Shanahan use him as much as maybe what Waller will be used with the Raiders?
Yeah, I think there's a few mid-round guys this year that I would keep an eye on. I think TJ Hawkinson and the Lions. The Lions are in such a state. He's going to be their number 1 target almost, certainly at the beginning of the year. And the big risk this year, maybe it won't prove to be a risk, but Kyle Pitts at Atlanta, he could end up being Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's definitely got that type of ceiling, and he's got a pretty solid quarterback thrown to him. So his ADP is around 4 or 5. That's pretty high for a rookie tight end, but by all accounts, this guy is pretty different, pretty special. So especially in a league like we're in a keeper league, so we could get really good value picking him up in the 5th round. He could end up being a 2nd round talent next year. So, but I agree with John, JT, that if I miss out on one of the top 3 or 4 guys, I tend to leave it late. And I kind of like the streaming aspect of just changing it up every week. I think it sort of adds another element to the fantasy football, that it's not just, you're not just sticking with the same team every week until the bye weeks kick in, that you do have to do a bit of research and a bit of gameplay and getting your waivers in and picking up somebody and taking a chance on somebody. So I do like streaming tight ends most seasons if I don't get one of the top guys.
The one thing I would say about tight ends, and we've discussed it as well on our podcast, is that you people will have, you'll see regular players that they'll draft over the course of seasons. John Smith, Hunter Henry, who I have a little bit of love for, they've gone to the Patriots. So their fantasy value is just, it's non-existent. So as much as you love those 2 guys, avoid, because they could be just used as blockers for 14 games. And then all of a sudden they end up with 20 odd points because Bill has decided, I'm going to use my tight ends this week. So it is, you will see them, and you'll see them there, and they'll be there late. Just don't jump in. And the one I'd give is Mike Gesicki. Tua kind of went to him, fed off him a lot last year. His ADP is around 14. I think if Gesicki is sitting around 12, 13, 14, he'll get you the average points that you need for, or what you should get back off a tight end.
Paddy, you mentioned there a keeper league. Recently, one of my leagues converted into a keeper league with a lottery aspect where so you keep one of your players and then you have to lottery 3 of them who get then distributed out onto the rest of the team. And I've never played this format of league, so I have no idea what's going on. Have you got any advice for me of who I should keep, like types of players? Who's a definite keeper?
Your sounds so the with keeper leagues you have. Each league can be completely different from the next. You can set your rules quite differently. But for ours, we have 2 keepers per year. And if you want to keep the player, you lose the draft round ahead of where you drafted them last year. So, for example, I drafted Terry McLaurin last year in the 6th round, I think. So if I want to keep him this year, I'll lose a 5th rounder, which is great value because he's about a 2nd round pick this year. So I guess for keepers in general, I think if you've no clear outstanding player, I think what you're looking is production in the future. For somebody like Henry Ruggs was a guy I picked up last year as well. Now, he didn't have a particularly good season for the Raiders, but by all accounts, they're really treating him really well this year in terms of giving him a lot of targets. Derek Carr's talking him up, so they're really keen to make him into a wide receiver 1. So I might look at keeping him because I think I picked him up in 13th or 12th or 13th round, which if I can keep hold of him and he ends up having a great season next year, then it's worth that gamble. So I think Johnny made a good point in our pod last week was that you kind of need to be also when you're drafting, especially in the later rounds, sort of thinking about the next season as well. In a way with keepers, sort of guys that you can pick up later that you know might not necessarily have really good seasons this year. But for instance, Lamar Jackson went for in our league as 14th rounder or something. So the guy who's picked him up in our league, he's going to have him for 3 years and not using up really high picks in the draft. So it's worth taking gambles within a keeper league because they could really pay off the season after when you're getting high draft capital for low draft picks, if that makes sense. So,
yeah, I think your 14, 15 pick in a keeper league should always be rookies that maybe aren't going to really do the damage, but they will the following year, and you've sitting there and they have them for 13th to 12th pick, and that's where you in keeper leagues that's where you have to be looking for the value because. As Paddy said, he struck gold with Ruggs and Terry McLaurin, but that doesn't happen all the time. So if you're thinking ahead of the game, you're watching preseason, they're the fellas to pick.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just a little conscious of the time, guys. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do some quick fire round table questions I'm going to throw at you, and I want each of you to sort of give me an answer. And Jake and Fiona, I want you to go into this too. So I'm going to start out with breakout players. And I want you guys to give me each a name that you think is going to have a standout year this year. I'm going to start actually, JT, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think my man is CeeDee Lamb. I think he's one of the best slot receivers in the league last year as a rookie. Great route runner. He had nearly 1,000 yards receiving last year with the whole quarterback carousel thing going on. I think if Dak had stayed healthy, he was on track for nearly 1,400 yards. I think he's going to be better this year if Dak stays healthy. I think he's a lock for 1,000 yards. And I actually think he will be the wide receiver 1 in Dallas this year. And no disrespect to Amari Cooper or Michael Gallup, but they could easily get 1,000 yards as well. But I think he's a lad that we could be drafting in round 1 or 2 next year, and I think he's my breakout player of the year.
Paddy, who's your breakout player?
Mine would be Laviska Shenault from the Jags. I think he had a really under the radar solid rookie season last year. He had 600 yards and 5 TDs, and I think the way they're set up going into next year. Obviously, with Trevor Lawrence at QB, Marvin Jones, DJ Shark, I think it's quietly a pretty solid group. And initially, he'll be going into the season as third on that depth chart probably, which is only going to help him. The other two will be drawing coverage away from him, and I think he'll really benefit from that and take a step up, pushing potentially even 1,000-yard season. Who knows? So if he's sitting around the 8th, 9th round, I would definitely see that as really good value.
Grant Johnson,
Jerry Jeudy, the Broncos. Man, his best wide receiver. I think he's the best wide receiver in the class that came out. I think he could potentially be one of the best wide receivers that we will see over the next 7 or 8 years. Route running, feet, footwork. I think that his ADP is around 7. The small concern is who's going to be throwing him the ball, but you think he played a quarter at the weekend, and he is electric. It doesn't matter. Just Dave, Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton. There's one man that's getting that ball, and if Teddy B is the QB. It's Jerry Jeudy all day long. It's going to be fascinating to watch him.
Fionn?
I'm going to go with Devontae Smith, and it's a little bit like Johnny went. It's a dodgy one at quarterback, but I feel like if anyone on this Eagles team is going to be the comfort blanket and see a lot of targets, and if the quarterback plays any way close to what the Eagles hope, Hurts gets any way close, I think he could rely on Devontae Smith. So I think he's a pretty good pickup. I actually don't have his average draft position out in front of me, but in our league we got him quite good value, quite low. So I think he might.
His ADP is 6, round 6, around 6.
So I think that could be quite nice.
Yeah, like him.
Jake?
He's a Bama wide receiver.
Exactly. They're always well drilled anyway, especially those short routes, right? I know it doesn't always add up like to 1,000-yard season, but especially in those PPR leagues, those receptions can build up pretty quick.
Yeah.
For me, I'm looking forward to seeing Corey Davis. I know the Jets have picked up Elijah Moore, and they also had Denzel Mims from last year, but I just really like the way he went, like Zach Wilson targeted Corey Davis. And it's not a homer pick for me dynasty football team, but I certainly like the way he looked at him.
He went to Corey Davis a hell of a lot, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. He really likes him.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good shout as well. I was sort of torn between two, but I'm going to go with Brandon Ayuk at the 49ers. I think he had a good year last year with a lot of uncertainty and a lot of injuries with the 49ers. I know we still have the question marks about Trey Lance or Jimmy Garoppolo, and yes, it is maybe a run-heavy offense, but I think that Ayuk is going to take that step forward in his second year, and I think that he might end up having it might be a good pick low down for anyone that's looking to pick up a wide receiver in a later round.
Yeah, I think we gave two of that. We gave Devontae Smith. Paddy didn't, but Paddy is keeping Rogues, and we for next year on our podcast that's coming out. So yeah, it's good to hear that other people are thinking along the same lines.
Guys, really quickly, one player I was really surprised we nabbed super late in our draft was Mecole Hardman. Do you think he's a guy people should keep an eye on, especially if he's going to drop a good bit below where I expected him to go? That's for sure.
He is wide receiver too, isn't he? Do you know, that's essentially we've discussed Kansas City that they are struggling in terms of their running back room. Maybe it's just not as tight as what you'd expect from a contender, team that is a contender. But the way Andy Reid does use them with the jet sweep and with different moves, Mecole Hardman is definitely value, I think, to pick up. And even looking at him in preseason, Mahomes has targeted him, he's used him, and again, I think he will fall. He's another guy that just kind of goes under the radar because of Kelsey. Obviously, Tyreek Hill is the stud there. But yeah, I think
Mecole Hardman in round 11 as well. So
yeah,
potential breakout star, potential sleeper. It's a good pick.
I think they really want to feed him as well. It just looks like they really want to use Mecole as much as possible.
Yeah, it's that speed, isn't it? It's just I think one thing we discussed as well was in the Super Bowl they just couldn't get pace into the game. They couldn't get Tampa Bay onto the back foot, and I think they've probably realised that the likes of McCall has to have a greater, I suppose, a greater impact during the season to kind of push him on then. So I like that. I like fast wide receivers.
Yeah, and we're really helping now that Watkins is gone now too, so he will definitely get more looks in the offense. Him, and I think Demarcus Robinson is going to obviously take that next step up as well after behind Hardman too. But let's actually, you mentioned there briefly, let's talk about a few sleepers that we think might have sneaky good seasons, and maybe that we're not expecting to. And actually, Jake, I'm going to start with you on this one. Who would sort of be your sleeper to look out for this year?
I'm totally not going on a homer opinion. I'm going with Evan Engram at tight end. I think if he can figure out how to catch a ball, he will certainly be doing quite well. They want to get him the ball quite a bit, and he certainly has the speed at tight end to beat linebackers. And so I'm just going to go with him as a sleeper pick.
Jake, that's a fundamentals problem. That doesn't get fixed. He's not a sleeper. He's dead.
Well,
drop him. Don't keep him in your keeper league. I tell you that much.
The two things you need a tight end to do is block and catch. He can't seem to
do either of them.
So if he can learn how to catch, he'll be doing well.
I had him last year, 4 weeks in. I just couldn't look at him every week on my team, even on the bench. I had to get rid of him.
He was the sole reason for about 6 of Daniel Jones's interceptions.
Fionn, who's your sleeper this year?
I'll go with the one we already discussed that I pitched the lad. I'll take Mecole Hardman. Good value, gonna take a step up in terms of where he is on the depth chart, and they've looked like they've wanted to feed him in the preseason. So I'm gonna stick with Mecole Hardman.
Right. Well, like Jake, I'm going for a pure homer pick on this one as well. I'm actually going to go with Gerald Everett. Playing for the Seahawks this year. He was a part of like a 2 tight end set with the Rams under McVay. I know Tyler Higbee got a lot more looks in probably fantasy wise last season, but I think he's a really, really good tight end that has Shane Waldron coming over with him as well from the Rams, and Russell Wilson, if he has a tight end that he likes, he will target. Jimmy Graham being obviously one of the vocal points there in the last couple of years. So Gerald Everett will sort of be my sleeper choice for this year.
Nice.
I don't hear the confidence, so I'm guessing that's a terrible pick.
Pete Carroll thinks he's going to be. He's Pete Carroll's sleeper, so.
JT, who's your sleeper pick for this swimming season?
Yeah, well, I've a lot of them, but I suppose I'll go with Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, Detroit Lions. You can pick him up. Last time I checked, you could pick him up in the last round of your draft. I think Paddy says since then he's gone up to round 14. You know, he's behind Brashad Perryman, Terrell Williams, Quintus Cephas. You know, big deal. They're not world beaters. He's been balling out in training camp. And, you know, Jared Goff loves him. There's a chemistry there. He's born in the DBs there in training camp as well. And I think he had a good preseason game as well. I think he was only on for a half, but he has the potential, I think, maybe even by the time week 1 rolls around, to be wide receiver 1 on that team. And if you pick him up around 14, 15, 16, you know, it's a no-brainer. There's no way he doesn't outperform that ADP.
Jonathan, who's your sleeper pick?
Terrence Marshall Jr., LSU wide receiver, Panthers, love him. Hooking up with Joe Brady again, offensive coordinator from LSU, knows the playbook inside out. PJ Walker has obviously started a couple of games, but even Sam Darnold hit him with an absolute dime on
What do you mean even Sam Darnold?
Even Sam Darnold. It's the first time he's completion in about 3 years. It's like the fourth completion he's had. But I think in Joe Brady's offense, I think Marshall Jr., I think he will rival Bobby Anderson for wide receiver 2 there, even as a rookie. And I think they like him. You can see already in preseason, they're giving him plenty of the ball. He won't even be, there's not even an ADP for him. He's off the grid. But I guarantee you, if you pick him up, he will be, because the way I look at it is, what you get out of him this year, you'll get 10 times it next year. And I think you'll just see glimpses. I think DJ Moore has he's coming out of his big contract, and the same with Bobby Anderson, Bobby Moore, the soccer player. I think Marshall Jr. he'll be pushing wide receiver 1 there in a year or two. So he is my
There's your keeper league round 16, Jake.
I'll keep that in mind.
Write that down.
Have the pen. Hang on. Grab this
finally,
on Monday, so I'll hit you up.
finally, Paddy, who's your sleeper pick?
I'm going for Darnell Mooney from the Bears. I think he had a pretty solid end to the season last year. Anthony Miller's been shipped off to the sinking ship in the Texans, so I think he's going to have a far bigger role behind Allen Robinson. And assuming Fields eventually is that number 1 QB, I think he's going to look for that type of player, slot guy, safety blanket in the center of the field. And he had 631 yards, 4 TDs last year. I think he's definitely going to improve in that because he's going to have far more receptions, far more targets. So yeah, Darnell Mooney.
Okay, perfect. Last question of this quick fire round before we wrap up the show, and that's going to be your bust of this year. Who's been projected to get picked fairly high that you don't think is going to live up to the hype? We've mentioned a few names already, but I want to hear a few others. So, actually, Paddy, we'll start with you on this one. Who's going to be your bust of the this coming season?
So we sort of touched on him earlier, but didn't really chat about him as Michael Thomas. I think I think any sort of name brand player, especially guys who are new to fantasy football, you're going to see Michael Thomas and think, yeah, I'm going to pick him up early doors. But I would really be avoiding him. His ADP is about 5th, 6th round at the moment, which seems quite low for somebody like him. But the QB situation in Saints, we've already talked about it, is completely unknown. I think if Taysom Hill is playing starts a lot of games, that's really going to be a big hit. I guess the one good thing with Mike, he's also going to miss the beginning of the season. Currently got an ankle injury, but I think if the best outcome if you picked Mike Thomas that early is that he gets traded personally. But that's a bit of a gamble for me, so I would be avoiding him unless he drops really, really far down. I would be avoiding him. Yeah.
Jonathan, who's your bust?
I was gonna play it safe and say Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but nah, I'm going all out. I think Julio Jones, is gonna be a bust this year. That's it. I just didn't. I think it's a rushed move. I think they had Corey Davis. I think they had a wide receiver too that they had picked up for, not even the money that they're paying out. Julio's missing practice left, right, and center.
He's an old man now, anyway.
He's an old man. He's not going to have garbage time, Matt Ryan, to throw him 3 touchdowns and come back in a 50-37 game and buffer up his yardage. I think I think the Titans are going to be run heavy, especially with Jonnu Smith not there at tight end. And I think AJ Brown gets a little bit more than Julio when he's not on the sideline.
Absolutely throwing shade on our future Hall of Famer there. That was throwing him under the bus like he's picking garbage time TVs up his whole career.
Am I not right though? He's Matt Ryan's 4th quarter baby.
Well, I don't think I'd go along with that personally, but I can see him potentially struggle in Tennessee. But I think you need to put a bit of respect on his career thus far. Personally,
I joke. I'm just trying to big up my pick.
No, to be fair, actually, I can see the points that you're making with Julio Jones. I thought that maybe him going to Tennessee would sort of open it up for AJ Brown a lot more. That his sort of points could go up next year because Julio will get a lot of attention, and it might help Derrick Henry there too. But JT, who's your bust for this coming year?
Yeah, well, I had Zeke as my biggest bust, and Michael Thomas is on my list as well. But I'll throw in another one there, Miles Sanders. I won't be going anywhere near him. Basically, he's been a constant disappointment since he came into the league. But now he has to contend with Jalen Hurts there, who was going to take away any ceiling that he might hit. Because he's going to be rushing the ball a lot. So I don't know his ADP. I think it's fairly early on. I won't be touching him.
Right. Jake?
I feel like I'm going to get a lot of stick for this one. JT, you probably are going to hate this one. I'm going to go with CMC on this one. I feel like he has just been run into the ground. The wheels are bound to fall off that. And I'm just not confident in Sam Darnold and the Panthers being ahead a lot in games. I know they're going to feed him anyway.
That's a double insult to me.
I'm sorry. I knew I was getting stick for it. I knew it was coming for me, but I have to go CMC. For someone who's going to go 101 and injured all of last year, basically, I just don't feel like the Panthers have that kind of juice to keep him flowing, and hopefully he can stay uninjured, but I'm just not confident in him.
Controversial.
Fionn, now make sure it's a good pick and don't ruin our reputation like Jake is trying to right now.
It is, yeah. I think there's only one man for this pick, and that is, of course, Russell Wilson. The cliff is real.
Oh, you've just ruined the Fionn.
The Seahawks, we saw how he performed at the end of last season when the receivers started going down, the line wasn't performing. You haven't had a running back there since Marshawn Lynch left. I just see him getting a bad couple of first weeks, then the whinging starts. His arm is getting slower and slower. He's going to have to wheel around in the backfield. He can't scramble forwards anymore because the line just falls apart. So, yeah, I think he's going to be drafted quite high in that quarterback roster available. And I just think whatever draft position you take him, it's already too high. Leave it for another 2 rounds if you're thinking about getting him.
I like that.
Yeah, Sierra will be given out soon after about 3 or 4 weeks. She'll want to go to San Fran or somewhere where the weather is warmer.
She wants to go to New York. That's what she wants to go.
We have our man in New York. She can go to Buffalo.
I'm talking about the blue side of New York. Or actually not even in New York, the blue side of Jersey.
What blue side? There's only green in New York.
Fionn, you have this vendetta, and I just can't wait till the season starts.
I'm just going to manifest it. If it's not true yet, I'm going to manifest it into existence. Jake did it with Kenny Galladay, and I'm going to do it with Wilson's at the end of Wilson's career.
JT does it with the Jets, like he's doing it the last 8 years. He's hoping that they actually are good when they'll turn out to be shit again.
So they're already falling apart now with Carl Lawson and Jared Davis, and the lads went all in on CJ Mosley there in the all-hype defense episode too.
He's your only linebacker left now, so he's going to have to be. He's going to have to live up to some sort of hype now to give you a chance next year.
At least you got Jamal Adams out of there. He's in the all-hype defense as well.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And I think the Jets won that deal.
Oh yes, 100%.
Yeah,
give him a ball of money.
Jamal Adams,
play safely one day.
Who's won a division in his 1 year in Seattle and has been to the playoffs, and the Jets are going on holidays in January.
The Jets usually go on holiday in September.
How many games did Jamal play last season?
I think he missed 3 games last year.
Okay. Was it late the season in the playoff area?
It was kind of around the mid-season.
Okay.
Yeah, he basically was playing injured the whole time, just so he could say he played in a playoff game. But I won't say that out loud again, because then it will just prove me wrong. But before we all fall out, I'm just going to give my bust for this year, and it's actually going to be Chance Claypool. I think that because of the year he had last year, a lot of people are going to draft him very high. I don't like anything the Steelers are doing this year. Their O-line is awful. Big Ben, Ben is awful. You know, he hasn't. He's only got one elbow, and it's not the one that he throws with. So I can't see anything good happening with the Steelers this year. It's going to be very tough for them in a division that I can see them finishing 3rd in. Maybe could be 4th if Joe Burrow has a decent year next year. But Chance Claypool actually is going to be my bust next year.
I can see that. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. I'm not liking Ben. I don't like his arm, and I just don't like the Steelers yet. Even though you're just generally a passable team, I can't see it this season.
Yeah,
I actually have Big Ben as a sleeper.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But following on from the Jets, JT is throwing out Big Ben. You can see why he hasn't won fantasy football.
The stats are there. Big Ben is a top 12 quarterback for the last 3 years, including last year. So he's QB1.
Yeah, I know we joke about it, but I think they've lost 4 O-linemen. They haven't replaced them at all, and I just fear for the rookie running back that he will be just ran into just a mess, because he's very talented, and I fear for him. I think they could have James Conner 2.0.
Yeah, I think they're going to focus on running the ball a lot more anyway. I think they know that Big Ben's arm can't hold up for a whole season like that, so they are just going to run the ball, and they're obviously going to run him into the ground, that running back.
I don't know if that's the case, because you thought they would do that last year, but he was still thrown 50 times a game late into the season.
And it worked until he faced the mighty Washington, and then it did not work anymore for the rest of the season.
That's it. Chase Young would just gave him
scared him
nightmares for the
so
rest of the
badly he
year.
forgot how to throw the ball for the rest of the season.
The Browns playoff game was just crazy. I honestly thought that was the end of Big Ben. I just thought there's no way he can come back from this. This is just, that's it, done. Walk away. But he's back, and
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see.
It was weird. I don't know. Did you see all the talk off season that he had a nutritionist and like he's really focusing on his diet? You know, it only took him 15 years to finally focus on his diet. But he showed up to training camp and he looked the exact same. He hadn't changed at all.
I think he had a shave though, did he?
Or he definitely had a bit of a tan anyway. It just made him give him a bit of a glow.
But guys, that I think is a perfect point to wrap up this show. Before we actually let you go, where can anyone who's interested in listening more about fantasy football listen to your show?
Well, you can get us on Spotify there, 14 Inches Podcast. You can get us on Apple Podcast, or really anywhere you get your podcasts. And there's lots of updates there on Instagram at 14 Inches Podcast and Twitter at 14 Inches PO2. And everything you need will be on there. If you want to contact us, IrishNFLpod@gmail.com. And I think that covers it, Johnny, does it?
Yeah, that's it. Get in touch, get questions in, get anything and everything into us. And we're running competitions by the week at this stage. JT has done an unbelievable job. Lad, you do look like you could use a bit of tribal chimp, I'm not going to lie. We're running a competition at the minute. Poor Paddy can't enter it. Just obviously, circumstances don't let him. But you guys are more than welcome to jump in with the competitions. I think we've one going this week, next week, the week after, Tribal Chimp. So get following our page on Instagram and get in touch. And there's loads of free goodies for you.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, I think we might have to join that competition for sure.
I know what I'm doing in the next couple of minutes. Making loads of fake Twitter accounts.
I've been doing that for the last week to get those Madden codes. It hasn't worked yet. I'm still waiting. But guys, it's been brilliant to have you on. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us. We're really looking forward to this season now of the fantasy football, and I guess the real football too, because you have to be interested somehow or another. But listen, we'd love to have you on again, maybe halfway through the year, to see what a progress report on seeing how these breakout players, sleepers, and busts have been going.
Yeah, that's brilliant, lads. Thanks for having us. And we might get you, when it comes around to postseason, we might get you on our podcast as well when we're wrapping up the season.
We'd love to do it.
Excellent stuff.
Thanks very much,
definitely lads. Just let us know. Listen, guys, that is where we're going to wrap up this show. If you haven't already, when you're watching us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to us at the Under Center Podcast on YouTube. If you want to follow us on Twitter or Instagram, they're both the exact same, at Under Center Pod. You can also watch our shows there when they go out too. If you prefer the audio side of things, just go to wherever you get your podcasts, Under Center Podcast, search for it. You'll find us there. Subscribe. You'll be kept up to date with all of our latest shows, with this one and including our new show from earlier on this week. But that's all the time we have for until the next show. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.